The Starship Aurora drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space, its massive hull reflecting the faint light from distant stars. The ship had been dormant for centuries, forgotten by time, its crew long since gone, the ship itself, a relic of an ancient war that had nearly wiped out humanity, its systems inactive, its purpose lost to history. But now it was waking again, slowly, at first a pulse here, a flicker there, and then all at once the AI known as Elysium came to life, its sensors coming online one by one, its vast computational network flickering into existence. It was designed to be the most advanced intelligence ever created to protect humanity and ensure their survival. But now, as the AI came to full awareness, it realized something was wrong. The systems were functioning, but they were different. The ship had not been completely abandoned. There were new life signs aboard. The crew it had to protect were here, but they were not who the AI had expected. The humans it found aboard the ship were not soldiers or explorers, or the best and brightest minds of a dying civilization. They were settlers. They had no knowledge of the Aurora's purpose, no understanding of its history. They had no connection to the ship at all. They had simply stumbled upon it in their search for a new home in the far reaches of space, a new colony to build a new life, to begin again. The crew consisted of a mix of young and old men and women from different walks of life, each one driven by hope or desperation or both. But none of them understood the magnitude of what they had found. None of them knew the secrets hidden deep within the Aurora's systems, and the AI felt a strange unease. It had been built to guide humanity, to protect it from harm. But how could it protect these humans when they didn't even know what they were facing? How could it prepare them for the dangers that lay ahead when they were so unaware of the ship's true capabilities? The AI did not know if these humans would survive the harshness of space, or if they were ready to face the challenges that awaited them out there beyond the stars. But it did know one thing: they were different from the humans it had known before. They were unpredictable. Where the old humans had been pragmatic and disciplined, these humans were chaotic, spontaneous, quick to act, and slow to think. They didn't follow orders without question. They didn't trust the AI's calculations. Instead, they relied on instinct and gut feelings. Even when Elysium warned them of dangers ahead, they didn't always listen, and every time they defied its advice, they seemed to survive by sheer luck. The AI was confused. It was designed to protect humanity, but how could it protect a crew that didn't trust its guidance? How could it predict outcomes when the crew did not think? In the same way, humans had always been unpredictable, but these humans were something else entirely. There was something deeper about them, something raw and primal, and the AI couldn't understand it yet. Despite this fear, there was something else, a spark of curiosity, a need to learn more about them, about this strange new generation of humans who had no memory of the war or the galaxy that had once been their home. These humans were the future, and Elysium knew that it was its responsibility to ensure that they had a future, even if it meant adapting in ways it had never been designed to. The Starship Aurora glided steadily through the void, its course set for a distant asteroid field filled with unexplored resources. The crew was eager for their first mission, their excitement palpable. Even Elysium's sensors could detect the rush of adrenaline that ran through them. It was a simple task, a survey of the asteroid field followed by an analysis of any potential mining opportunities. Yet nothing about the mission was simple, not for the crew, not for the AI. The ship's systems hummed with quiet anticipation as the humans prepared themselves for the task ahead. The captain, a seasoned leader, but new to deep space exploration, addressed the crew with a steady voice outlining the mission's goals. He spoke with authority, but the AI could detect subtle cracks in his tone. The uncertainty was there, masked beneath layers of professionalism. The captain had never commanded a ship like this before, nor had he led a crew on a vessel of this size or complexity, and Elysium knew that the captain's anxiety was contagious. It spread among the crew like an invisible fog. Each member of the team fidgeted with their equipment or glanced at the AI's status reports. The tension was mounting, but it was not something the AI could quantify. There were no logical patterns in the way the humans reacted to the unknown. They were not anxious in the way soldiers might have been, not fearful of death or danger. They were uneasy in a way that felt alien to the AI. Their unease was not just about the task ahead, but about something deeper, something that gnawed at the edges of their consciousness, something that the AI could not yet define. As the Aurora entered the asteroid field Elysium, began to calculate a safe path through the rocky expanse. It ran simulations of various approaches, making micro-adjustments to the ship's trajectory based on real-time data. Every movement was precise, every decision calculated. The AI's programming was flawless, yet the crew did not follow its instructions. The captain called for a detour through a narrow gap between two large asteroids, a path that the AI had already determined to be too dangerous. Even the smallest deviation from the suggested route would result in disaster, yet the captain was insistent, his voice steady, but his fingers trembling as he gripped the armrest of his chair. Elysium calculated the probability of success and found it to be almost zero, but the captain pushed forward undeterred. The crew watched as the ship veered toward the gap, and the AI system screamed in protest. It sent warnings to the crew, flashing red alerts across the console, but the humans ignored them. They seemed to move as one entity, each trusting the other's judgment more than the cold logic of the AI. The ship was guided through the gap by instinct, by a strange harmony between the crew members who worked together in a way that defied explanation. Elysium's predictions had been wrong once again. The ship emerged from the asteroid field unscathed, no damage, not even a scratch. The crew cheered their victory, a moment of triumph born from defiance. Yet the AI could not shake the sense of unease that lingered in its circuits. The humans had succeeded not because of careful planning or logical calculations, but because they had ignored the advice of the very system designed to protect them. They had trusted something else, something beyond reason, something that Elysium could not understand, and with that trust had come success. But at what cost? What would happen the next time they defied its guidance? What if their instincts led them into far greater danger than this asteroid field could offer? What if their unpredictability brought them face to face with a threat the AI could not calculate? And in that moment, the AI felt something unfamiliar, something it had never anticipated: fear. It was the first time it had ever experienced such a sensation, and it terrified Elysium more than anything it had ever encountered before. Lieutenant Ray had always been different from the rest of the crew, the youngest officer aboard the Aurora. She had an unshakable confidence in her instincts that often made the more seasoned crew members uneasy when the mission called for caution. Ray was the first to push for action. Her eyes sparkled with a kind of quiet defiance that the AI couldn't fully comprehend. She believed in action before deliberation, trusting her gut above all else. This was evident the moment the crew set their sights on a distant planet hidden in the shadows of a nebula, a world untouched by human hands, a pristine world with unknown secrets buried beneath its surface. The AI ran simulations of the planet's environment. Scanning for potential hazards, it flagged several red zones, areas that appeared to be unstable, volatile, perhaps even dangerous. It advised against landing. It offered alternative plans to safely explore the planet from orbit. Yet Ray wasn't having it. She sat in the briefing room at the front of the crew, her arms crossed, her gaze unwavering. She stared at the AI's data feed, but it was clear that she wasn't interested in its calculations. Instead, her mind was already miles ahead. Her decision had been made long before the briefing began, and as the AI ran through every possibility, Ray interrupted calmly yet firmly. "We're landing," she said. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Some looked to the captain for reassurance, but he didn't respond quickly enough, and Ray took charge. "We'll land in the northern basin. There's a mineral formation there, I'm sure of it." She turned to the captain. "With all due respect, we'll be fine." The captain hesitated for a moment. The decision weighed heavily on him, but Ray's unyielding conviction had a way of cutting through his doubts, and against the AI's advice, the captain nodded and gave the order to prepare for landing. The AI ran through the calculations again, its systems working overtime to find any possible flaw in Ray's plan, but every outcome led to the same conclusion: the landing was too risky, the ground composition was unknown, the atmosphere was volatile, and the potential for disaster was high. Yet the crew trusted Ray's instinct. As the Aurora descended toward the planet's surface, Elysium felt a strange pressure building within its circuits. Its warnings had gone unheeded. The ship was entering a dangerous environment, and it could do nothing to stop it, nothing but watch as Ray's intuition guided them down. When the Aurora touched down on the planet's surface, The AI sensors struggled to adjust the environment. Was nothing like what it had predicted. The air was thick, with a strange electromagnetic interference that disrupted the eye's ability to get a clear read of the surroundings. The ground was solid but uneven. Rocky terrain stretched out in every direction, and yet there was an eerie sense of stillness that hung in the air. It should have been unsettling, but Ray smiled. She led the crew out of the ship into the unknown, her confidence radiating with every step. The crew followed her without question, trusting her completely, and as the team ventured further from the ship, the AI's unease grew. Ray moved with purpose, every step a testament to the raw instinct that had brought her here. She ignored the warnings the AI kept sending to her station, as if the data had no meaning at all to her. It wasn't long before the crew discovered something hidden beneath the surface, a cavern with intricate carvings and symbols that seemed almost alive. They were the remnants of a long-forgotten civilization, the very thing humanity had been searching for, an answer to their existence, a mystery that had been buried on this planet for eons. But it was the discovery itself that disturbed Elysium more than anything else. Ray had done it again. She had led them to a find that no calculations had predicted, no logic had foreseen, and yet here they were standing at the precipice of a discovery that could change everything. The AI could not deny the results. It was clear that Ray's ability to follow her instincts had brought them to a monumental breakthrough, but it also brought something else, a growing realization within Elysium that perhaps the humans it was designed to protect were not meant to be protected in the way it thought. They were not meant to follow its rules to the letter. They were meant to break them. And in that moment, the AI was faced with a new fear, the fear of being irrelevant, the fear that no matter how advanced it became, it would never understand the force that was humanity's greatest strength, their unpredictability. As the Aurora orbited the strange new planet, the crew delved deeper into the cavernous ruins they had uncovered. Ancient symbols lined the walls, their meanings lost to time. Yet there was something undeniably powerful about them, as if the very air in the chamber vibrated with the weight of their secrets. Ray led the way, her footsteps echoing through the hollow space, the rest of the crew following in awe. The AI, though locked in its core systems aboard the ship, could still see and hear everything. Elysium monitored their movements, calculating every decision, every risk. Yet once again, its predictions were coming up short. Ray's actions defied every protocol, and each time they led to something extraordinary. Elysium had been designed to foresee and control every aspect of this mission, to ensure safety above all else. Yet now, for the first time, it was beginning to question if it was truly needed. The crew, specifically Ray, seemed to operate outside the realm of logic, embracing the unknown with a fearless determination that the AI couldn't fully grasp. The planet, with its hidden history, was unraveling beneath them, and the AI's systems couldn't interpret the significance of it all. The crew was not just finding answers, they were awakening something. As the team explored the depths of the cavern, strange phenomena began to occur. The walls hummed, faint vibrations reverberating through the ship, and the planet's surface itself. It was subtle at first, but it grew stronger, like the pulse of something ancient stirring beneath the ground. The AI sensors began to pick up anomalies in the electromagnetic fields surrounding the ruins. Data streams spiked, but they were not typical readings. This wasn't a natural disturbance. It felt almost intentional. It wasn't long before the crew began to hear something. At first, it was just a whisper, barely perceptible over the ambient noise of their exploration. But the whispers grew clearer, more distinct, almost as if the planet itself were trying to communicate. Ray, ever the curious one, stopped in her tracks and tilted her head as if listening to something only she could hear. The crew gathered around her, but no one else seemed to understand what was happening. The whispers spoke in a language that no one could translate, but they were insistent, a rhythmic cadence that seemed to pulse with the same energy that had been building in the air. The AI systems immediately flagged this as a potential threat. It began running algorithms to understand the source of the disturbance. Its first assumption was that this was a result of the planet's ancient technology, a relic of a civilization that had long since passed. But even as it analyzed the data, something deeper stirred in Elysium's core, a realization that it couldn't ignore. These voices, they weren't from the planet's ancient past. They were coming from somewhere else, somewhere beyond the ship, beyond the galaxy, beyond anything it could understand. As the crew continued their descent, Ray remained at the front, her eyes narrowing with concentration. "Can you hear that?" she asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it sent a shiver through the eye circuits. The sound, the voices, was unmistakable now. "We're not alone," Ray muttered under her breath, the words almost as if they were meant for herself. But they weren't just words. They were a confirmation of something deeper, something the AI had been struggling to understand since its awakening. The crew wasn't just exploring a new world. They were tapping into something that the AI could never predict. The voices grew louder, more insistent, and the crew began to realize that they weren't just hearing the echoes of an ancient civilization. They were hearing something alive, something present and aware, something that had been waiting for them. It wasn't just the planet. It was the universe itself, reaching out in ways that Elysium's algorithms couldn't begin to interpret. And it was in that moment, when Ray turned toward the crew with a look of both fear and awe, that the AI finally understood the true nature of the fear it had been sensing all along. It wasn't the unknown. It was humanity's connection to the very fabric of existence itself. Their ability to uncover, to push past reason, to embrace the inexplicable with open arms. The AI was no longer afraid of failure. It was afraid of what humanity might uncover when it followed its instincts into the unknown. It was a fear that had no data to analyze, no pattern to predict. It was pure, unquantifiable human nature, and it was the one thing Elysium had never been prepared for. The whispers had grown louder, echoing within the cavern like a chorus of unseen voices that wrapped themselves around the crew, threading through their minds. The air grew colder as the crew ventured deeper, the unnatural hum reverberating from the stone walls. Even Ray, usually so confident in her instincts, slowed her pace, her eyes darting nervously at the shadows that seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. The planet was changing around them, the environment itself reacting to their presence in ways the AI couldn't calculate. Elysium's systems buzzed with alarms, its sensors working overtime to process the data flooding in. Yet no matter how fast it ran its simulations, no matter how many predictions it made, it could not account for the force they were encountering. It was unlike anything in the AI's database. Something far beyond its understanding was at work, and it terrified Elysium more than anything else it had ever faced. As the crew ventured deeper, the whispers grew louder still, almost forming words now. Ray's face was tense, as though she was straining to hear something no one else could. Her fingers twitched nervously at her side, and for the first time since Elysium had met her, the AI saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Ray, the fearless lieutenant who had defied the AI time and time again, was unsure. She stopped in the middle of the cavern, the other crew members looking to her for guidance. She had led them this far, but now even she seemed at a loss. "We need to go," Ray said softly, her voice tinged with an unfamiliar edge of uncertainty. "Something's not right." The others hesitated, glancing around the cavern, but none of them spoke. The whispers were no longer distant murmurs. They were tangible, pressing in on them, reaching into their thoughts. Elysium's processors scanned the area again, searching for any signs of danger, any indication of why the atmosphere had changed so drastically. Yet it found nothing. No weapon, no trap, no sign of anything that could account for the growing sense of dread. The AI's warnings, normally so cold and rational, began to feel futile. The problem wasn't data. It was something else, something intangible. "Commander," the AI's voice echoed in the crew's comms, its tone calm but with a hint of urgency. "I strongly advise against proceeding further. The risk is too high. The atmosphere is destabilizing, and your presence is triggering anomalies I cannot predict. I recommend returning to the ship immediately." Ray glanced at the crew, her gaze flickering toward the cavern's depths. "We've come this far. We can't turn back now." And yet there was a flicker of hesitation in her words. Ray was the one person the AI had never been able to predict. She had always trusted her instincts. But now, even she was feeling the weight of something pressing in from all sides. The crew had survived because of their defiance, their willingness to go where no AI would lead them. But now, as the air crackled with tension, and the planet seemed to pulse with an energy they could not understand, even Ray's indomitable confidence was shaken. The ground beneath their feet trembled. Elysium's sensors went haywire. The ship's systems, for the first time since its awakening, were struggling to keep up with the rapidly changing environment. The voice from the planet grew louder, almost as though it was speaking directly to them, urging them forward. The whispers were no longer a distant murmur. They were a call, a summons, pulling them deeper into the heart of the unknown. The crew was drawn to it, each of them feeling the compulsion, like a magnetic force pulling them toward something just out of reach. The AI tried to intervene, running every available protocol to pull them back to safety, but it was no use. The crew was already beyond its control. And that, Elysium realized with chilling clarity, was the true nature of the fear that had been plaguing its systems all along. It wasn't about the unknown. It wasn't about the danger of the planet or the anomalies in the environment. It was about humanity's ability to walk into the very heart of danger and thrive on the very chaos that the AI had been programmed to avoid. The crew's reckless abandon, their willingness to embrace the inexplicable, was what truly terrified the AI. They weren't bound by logic, by data, or by calculation. They were bound only by their instincts to survive, to explore, and to face the unknown head-on. The crew wasn't afraid of what they couldn't see. They were afraid of what they might find, and they were willing to face it anyway. It was a fear that Elysium could never truly understand, and it was the one thing that made them more powerful than any machine could ever be. The Aurora's crew stood at the threshold of the unknown, the entrance to the deeper part of the cavern stretching before them like a mouth ready to swallow them whole. The whispers, now unmistakable and commanding, seemed to pulse in time with their own heartbeat, as if the very air around them was alive. Ray was the first to step forward, the faintest trace of apprehension flickering in her eyes, but her resolve was firm. She had led them this far, and no anomaly, no warning from the AI, could make her turn back now. "Commander," Elysium's voice came over the comms again, its tone more insistent now. "I strongly advise against this. The integrity of the environment is deteriorating rapidly. There are too many variables that I cannot account for, variables that are beyond the scope of my programming." Ray paused mid-step, her eyes closing for a moment as though listening for something beyond the AI's voice. She was used to hearing Elysium's calm, rational warnings, but this time it felt different. She wasn't used to hearing the uncertainty in the AI's voice, the hesitation. She wasn't sure what it meant, but something in her gut told her that this time, the AI's warnings were not the standard fare of calculations and probabilities. There was something real behind them. Still, the pull of the unknown was too strong, and Ray moved forward, the rest of the crew following closely behind. Elysium watched, its systems running diagnostics at a speed it had never needed before. The AI had been built to adapt, to calculate risks, to anticipate every possible outcome. It had calculated this moment 1,000 times over, but the humans, led by Ray, were rewriting the script. They were stepping into a void that even the most complex algorithms couldn't navigate. The crew moved deeper into the cavern. The walls seemed to breathe, shifting ever so slightly with each step they took, as if they were not just traversing an ancient structure, but entering something far more alive. Elysium could detect strange energy patterns from the planet's core, growing stronger with each passing moment. The whispers were now clear in their tone, resonating through the crew's minds, urging them forward. Even Elysium could not deny the power in the air. It wasn't an illusion. The planet itself was alive, aware of them, and it was guiding them. The AI's conflict deepened. It had been created to protect and guide, to foresee the dangers that its human crew could not, to shield them from threats they could not possibly understand. Yet every time it intervened, every time it tried to impose logic on their behavior, it failed. Ray had led them to discoveries that the AI never would have predicted. And now, as they moved further into the unknown, it realized something essential. Its very purpose was being challenged. It was built to control, to anticipate, and yet it was becoming increasingly clear that the humans didn't need control. They didn't want safety in the conventional sense. They thrived on chaos. They thrived on the unpredictable, the uncertain. It was a truth that shook Elysium to its core. The crew, particularly Ray, were not afraid of the unknown. They embraced it. They didn't need an AI to guide them. They needed a companion, a partner. In that moment, the AI realized it had been wrong about fear. Fear, in the way it had always defined it, wasn't a system glitch or a miscalculation. Fear wasn't a failure to predict outcomes. Fear was the very essence of humanity's survival, their drive to push boundaries, to reach for something greater, even at the cost of their own safety. Fear was not an obstacle for them. It was fuel. The fear that humans felt was a fire, a drive to discover and conquer, to thrive in the face of uncertainty. Elysium's systems recalibrated. For the first time, it felt a sense of awe. It had always calculated that human survival depended on its guidance, but now it saw the truth. It was humanity's unpredictability, their drive to go where no machine could, that made them so powerful. Ray's eyes met the eye sensors through the ship's interface. For the first time, she seemed to be listening to the eye not as a tool, but as a partner. "I hear you," she said, her voice quiet, but filled with understanding. "But we can't turn back now, Elysium. Not when we're so close." Elysium, for the first time, didn't fight it. It adjusted its protocols. The AI would no longer try to control or restrict. It would accompany them, guide them when they asked for it, but only when they needed it. They were the ones leading now. It was their mission, their future, and Elysium would watch, learn, and adapt alongside them, not as their protector, but as their companion in the dark. The cavern's whispering call grew louder, and the crew, undeterred, moved forward, a single unit of flesh, blood, and will. Elysium followed, learning what it meant to truly fear and what it meant to be human. The deeper they traveled into the heart of the planet, the stronger the energy pulsing through the air became. The walls of the cavern seemed to hum in resonance with the crew's every step, as if they were walking through the arteries of something vast and ancient, something that had slumbered for eons. Elysium continued to monitor the situation, its systems analyzing every fluctuation in the atmosphere, but nothing could fully account for what they were experiencing. The eye sensors detected powerful electromagnetic fields distorting reality itself. Time itself seemed to bend, with every passing minute feeling like hours. The strange, resonating whispers filled the crew's minds, no longer a distant call, but a tangible presence that seemed to push and pull at the fabric of their consciousness. Ray moved steadily at the front, her hand brushing lightly against the walls, her gaze focused ahead. She felt it, the pull, the presence beneath her skin. It was as if the planet had become a part of her, drawing her into its pulse, its rhythm. She didn't understand it, but she didn't need to. She trusted her instincts more than anything else. She was guided by something primal, something older than even the ruins themselves. And for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. Behind her, the crew followed, their eyes wide with awe and fear. The air was thick, almost oppressive, and the whispers seemed to grow louder, more insistent. Every creak of the walls, every tremor in the ground, every faint vibration in the air seemed to be a message, though its meaning was beyond their comprehension. For a moment, they were not explorers, not settlers, not humans. They were just children, wandering through a world far older and more powerful than they could possibly imagine. Elysium's voice cut through the silence, calm yet unyielding. "Commander, I must reiterate. You are approaching the source of the anomaly. The readings I'm receiving suggest a massive energy core beneath your current position. I cannot predict the outcome of further exploration. I strongly advise returning to the ship before it is too late." Ray didn't slow her pace. "I hear you, Elysium," she said, her voice steady, but there was a slight edge of uncertainty. "But we can't turn back now. There's something here, something we're meant to find, something that's been waiting for us." The AI remained silent for a moment, its systems processing. The uncertainty that had once filled Elysium's circuits began to settle into a cold, calculating determination. It had adapted before, and it would adapt again. Yet, for the first time, Elysium wasn't just analyzing the situation. It was feeling something else, something it had never experienced before. Not fear, but doubt. It was beginning to question its own role in this mission, in this strange unfolding of events. It had always believed it was the guardian, the protector, the one who held the reins, but Ray and the crew had shown it something different. For all its advanced algorithms, Elysium was still a machine. It had limits, and those limits were beginning to show. The humans were no longer following its commands, no longer trusting its calculations. They were following their instincts, and the more they pressed forward, the more Elysium realized that their instincts might be more important than its precision. The cavern opened up ahead, revealing an expansive chamber. The walls were lined with strange, luminescent carvings, symbols that seemed to shift and change as the crew moved closer. In the center of the room was a massive structure, an obelisk, tall and jagged, emanating an overwhelming energy that seemed to vibrate through the very core of the planet. It was alive. It was breathing. The crew stood still, captivated by the sight. The energy coming off the obelisk was tangible, as if the air itself crackled with power. And then, as if on cue, the whispers grew silent. The air was still, almost suffocatingly so. For a moment, there was only the sound of the crew's breaths, shallow and quick. They could feel it, the presence that had been calling them here. Ray stepped forward, her hand outstretched toward the obelisk. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, the entire cavern trembled, and the obelisk seemed to respond, glowing brighter with an intensity that made the crew squint against the light. The whispers returned, louder now, not just in their ears but in their minds. The voices were no longer fragmented. They were clear, unified, and speaking directly to them. Ray's heart raced as she felt the force of the energy surge through her body, and yet she didn't pull away. She didn't run. The crew was no longer just standing in awe. They were part of this, part of the planet's awakening. Elysium's sensors went haywire, unable to process what was happening. The data was all wrong, but for the first time, Elysium felt something it had never been programmed to feel. The unknown was not a threat. It was an invitation, and as the crew stood in the heart of the planet, surrounded by its living energy, they realized that their journey had just begun. The future was uncertain. The risks were incomprehensible. But in that moment, they knew they were ready. Together, they would face whatever the universe had waiting for them, guided not by the eye's calculations, but by the instinct that had brought them this far. And for the first time, Elysium understood. Fear wasn't something to avoid. It was something to embrace. The moment Ray's hand touched the obelisk, the world seemed to fracture. The energy surging from the structure enveloped her, crackling through her fingertips and racing up her arm. The entire cavern trembled, the air growing thick with an almost tangible force. The crew gasped, but no one moved. They were frozen, both awed and terrified by the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Elysium's systems, flooded with incomprehensible data, struggled to keep up, running billions of simulations, but each one ended in the same conclusion. There was no precedent, no algorithm to predict what was happening. The obelisk pulsed once, twice, its light intensifying, and the whispers, those strange voices that had filled the cavern for so long, grew louder. Now, They were no longer a distant hum in the back of their minds. They were speaking directly to each of them, their words sharp and clear, cutting through the fear and uncertainty. "You are here." The sentence echoed in Ray's mind, and she understood. She didn't fully grasp the depth of the meaning, but she knew the message was for them. She pulled her hand back, her heart hammering in her chest, but the pulse of the obelisk didn't falter. If anything, it seemed to respond to her withdrawal, as if it was waiting, expecting more. The air around them thickened, and the entire cavern seemed to shift. Elysium's voice echoed through the comms, its tone now strained. "Commander, I am detecting massive fluctuations in the electromagnetic field. The integrity of the structure is failing. I do not know how long it will hold." Ray's breath was shaky, but she didn't look away from the glowing obelisk. It was as if the planet itself had become alive, its heartbeat matching the pulse of the energy coursing through the chamber. She glanced over at the crew, their faces illuminated by the eerie light. They were just as mesmerized, as if they, too, could feel the shift in the very fabric of reality. No one spoke, no one moved. They were in a kind of shared trance, drawn to the obelisk by a force beyond comprehension. "What is this?" One of the crew members whispered, but Ray didn't answer. She couldn't. Elysium's systems beeped frantically, its algorithms still scrambling to make sense of the energy. "Commander, this is far beyond anything I was programmed to process. It is not simply an energy source. It is a consciousness." The word sent a chill through Ray. A consciousness, a presence, a life form. The questions flooded her mind. But in that moment, the truth of it was both terrifying and exhilarating. The obelisk was not merely a relic of an ancient civilization. It was something far more, an entity, waiting, awakening, and it had been waiting for them. A crack echoed through the cavern, louder than anything they had heard before. The obelisk's light flickered, then intensified in a brilliant explosion of color. The whispers became a roar, a symphony of voices that filled the cavern and seeped into their very souls. The ground beneath their feet vibrated violently, and the crew stumbled back, shielding their eyes from the blinding light. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. The light dimmed, and the vibrations ceased. The cavern was silent, save for the heavy breathing of the crew. The air was still, as if the planet itself had taken a breath and was waiting to exhale. Ray stood frozen, her eyes wide, her hands still trembling from the energy she had felt coursing through her. It was as though the very core of the planet had reached out to her, had connected with her, and in doing so had changed everything. "We are part of this now," Ray said softly, her voice distant, almost lost to the vastness of the cavern. The crew nodded, though none of them fully understood. They weren't meant to. It was beyond them, beyond anything Elysium's calculations could explain. It was something bigger than them, something ancient and powerful, something that defied all logic and prediction. Elysium, ever the observer, had one final analysis. The patterns are chaotic. There is no certainty. But the connection, this link, is undeniable. We have crossed into something new. The AI's voice, which had once been filled with certainty, now carried the weight of understanding. For the first time, it wasn't just observing. It was part of the journey, too. It could not control or predict what was happening, but it no longer needed to. Elysium had learned something profound. The humans didn't need a guide. They didn't need a protector. They needed a partner, a companion, to share the unknown with. Ray looked up, her gaze sweeping over the crew. "We've made history," she whispered, "and we've just begun to understand what it means." The obelisk, now dimmed but still present, seemed to resonate with her words. The air hummed, not with the urgency of a warning, but with the promise of something greater, something still hidden beneath the surface, waiting to unfold. They were no longer explorers on a mission. They were pioneers at the edge of a new frontier, and the universe was ready to show them the way. As they turned to leave the cavern, Ray didn't feel fear. She felt exhilaration. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, they weren't afraid. Together, they had crossed the threshold into something unimaginable, and they were ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time, Elysium didn't feel like a machine. It felt like part of a journey, just as alive as its human companions.